Hello, Ryan. Hello, Martin. Hope everyone had a nice lunch. Hope everyone had a nice cup of coffee, sorted their children out. I've got Paul on. Hi there, Paul. So, Paul, you're still on mute for now, which is not a problem. So when you want to speak, remember to unmute. Brilliant. We're getting better at this. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We've got even more registrations today, and they're all popping up. So what we're going to do now is hand over to Ryan Dempsey from the Compliance Workbook to introduce Martin, Paul, and his session today. Same idea. At the end, we'll ask questions, so keep the questions coming and enjoy. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Dave. Hello, everybody. I'll introduce everybody, and then I'll share my screen, and then you'll have to just let me know that it's working when I share the screen. So first, we've got he's to the side of me, might not be to the side of me on you, but we've got Martin Simmonds. Martin, do you want to give people a little bit of an intro of who you are, where you come from?
Hi, everyone. I'm Senior Electrical Officer for Dudley Council. I've worked in the electrical field my whole life, about 25 years on the tools, and the last 13, 14 more contract management based.
And then we've also got, which is a little bit of a twist on, as this is an unconventional conference, we're going to do a brief chat about compliance and the realms of compliance. And I thought, why not bring in one of my closest friends and fellow man of E5 who works in the rail industry to give a little bit of a different spin on, or to show you that the word compliance kind of sits across everywhere. So I'll introduce you to Paul. Paul, do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Meenan. I work for an Italian company called Trenitalia. I'm the asset manager for a lovely little railway that runs from Fenchurch Street in London all the way through the south coast of Essex to Southend and Shoebury-Ness. And I'm responsible for all of the mechanical, electrical and fire systems and basic new station builds, refurbishments, stuff like that. Beautiful.
Right. We're going to jump into it. Because it is this unconventional, there's one thing that I don't really like to do, and I've never done it. Worked in social housing for many years as a client for Leeds City Council, and then obviously run my own software company now, predominantly working in social housing. But I never take these opportunities to try and promote my product and try to sell my product, because I don't like it when people shove things down your throat. So I decided we want to talk about compliance and try and do a little bit of a spin on what it means and why it's impossible to answer the question, what is compliance? I can see my screen, but I can't see everybody else. So Paul and Martin, can you see the screen that I'm looking at?
Yes, I can.
You can.
One, yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll run through it. Obviously, by seeing what is compliance, everybody's confused because everybody will have their own interpretation of what compliance means to them. As we work through the presentation, you'll realize that there's nothing wrong with that, but the general comment or the general question of what is compliance, it's important to realize that there isn't a set answer. You can't answer that question without further things. But we'll do a little bit of an icebreaker. Just want you to think outside the box and think. So last year, the housing regulator downgraded a housing association from a G1 to G2. And the reason for that was they had identified a number of C2 observations. Now, a C2 observation is something where an electrician will go into a property and he or she will identify something that is potentially dangerous. Now, that housing organization was had C2s on file for over 2 years. Now, when I've put on the bottom there, think about that. If it's potentially dangerous and they're non-compliant, yet the C2 was there for 2 years and nothing happened, does that not raise some questions around, was it really a C2? Was it potentially dangerous? Was it actually dangerous? And how can you use somebody's opinion to downgrade such a big organization?
If you don't mind me chipping in here, Ryan, I think it's the sign of a business with far bigger problems. To be perfectly honest with you, if a business can sit on 300 or 400 C2s for 2 years, they're evidently either got some serious tribal silo issues, their communication systems are bad, their change or their procurement or their financial planning or forecasting is in a big problem. It speaks volumes to the business.
It does. And yeah, I guess the point is that there's obviously much bigger issues with that organisation, but the reason why they were downgraded, there's some things around that. But when we talk about what's compliance, there's a few pictures here. We've got the police. I used to be a police officer, so I know what it means to be compliant to specific criminal and non-statutory laws that are in the industry. You've then got regulations around accountancies, financial compliance. There's a picture, a screenshot from my company's marketing material. A little bit of a kick to my company because we call ourselves the Compliance Workbook. And my view is that compliance is a bit of a buzzword, doesn't really tell you anything. We are addressing that with a little bit of a rebrand shortly. You've then got an image there of the wiring regulations, blue one, requirements for electrical installations. It's a non-statutory document, yet you can be non-compliant to it. The housing regulator, bottom left. Now, when we talk about compliance from the housing regulator perspective, the housing regulator looks at compliance against governance and financial viability, value for money incentives and rents, and they do an in-depth assessment on how you manage your processes. But when it comes to electrics or gas or compliance, they'll then refer to the Decent Home Standard, which they then assess you on that. So there's multiple levels of compliance there. International Compliance Association, there's an actual association, global one, which will define compliance, but again, it needs its intent. We've all got a duty of care, so are we compliant with that? And the last pitch is just explaining that there are multiple different things around compliance. So it is relatively easy to answer the question of the intent. So if I'm a qualified electrician and I am going to carry out a piece of electrical work, and you then go and assess that work, because you've got the intent, it's an electrical piece of work, you can then marry up what I've done to whether or not I've reduced the risk and whether I'm compliant against that. And I think the key is, if I was reading through the housing regulators documents and the regulation standards and the home standard, you look in there and you look for the number of times compliance referred, and I think it's around about 10 times, 10, 15 times. But then when you look at how many times the word risk is added in there, I think it was upwards of 70. So we should start referring to compliance. What is the risk?
Yeah, if you don't mind me chipping in here, Ryan,
yes,
just using the big blue book as an example, the wiring regulations, now a compliance manager will sit in a room somewhere, dark corner, flick through this book and say, oh, no, we're non-compliant. We've got C2s, C3s, and I haven't got funding. And that person sits in a little hollow room with their voice echoing around with nobody listening, because this is a non-statutory document, because they're talking the wrong language, because everybody around them and above them only speaks in the form of risk, corporate risk, business risk, financial risk, safety risk, public risk, all these different risks which sit in various silos of the business that need to work their way up. Someone's phone's going off. I don't know whose that is, but anyway, yes, all these different silos where they all own different levels of risk, and each risk tribe has to shout the loudest into board level to try and get the money. If you've got a blue book that's a guidance note, it's very difficult. And this is why I personally don't speak of compliance in my railway. I speak of everything as a passenger safety risk, an operational risk, a business continuity risk, a revenue risk, because the railway collects money to generate revenue to pay for itself. Now, if you kind of adapt your behaviours to that, what you'll find is at a corporate level, they're more dialed into your frequency. And this is why we're killing the word compliance. And what is it? It's different for every single different tribe.
And the good thing about that is, and I'm glad you said that, because my time in social housing, that's exactly one of the big things for me. If I had a particular risk within my organisation, I felt like I had to put my sales hat on. And that sales hat was, I had to then redefine how I communicated with the people who I had to sell the dream to. Now, I'm selling a dream of safety, but it's just financial. And again, brings me nicely onto, this image is an image.
I can agree with that, Ryan. Being still in that environment, you do get a lot of that.
It's hard.
It's very hard to convey the level of risk that some of our properties are putting people in.
But when you consider the likes of, from an electrical perspective, as the three of us are electrical, when you look at an RCD protective device that you see in a consumer unit these days, now they were coming in 1993 as for outdoor use, a long time ago. And yet we still have properties throughout the whole of social housing that don't have any RCD protection. Now, for us, we know that an RCD protected circuit gives the tenant or anyone using that a 97% chance of survival if they come into contact with the electrical installation. Yet when we try and sell that to them, the only thing the organisation sees is how many of these do we fit and how much is it going to cost us. Now, we are a reactive sector, and I think every sector is the same. And unfortunately, there is case law that you can refer to where that's backfired on some organisations. That there might be someone in this listening to this now who's a member of one of the organisations who it doesn't much to go case law around feelings around electrical safety and health and safety at work, and they wished they had listened to the person who was saying these RCD protection devices. It brings me quite nicely onto this picture, which Paul, you gave this to me a few years back, and it's part of the Institute of Asset Management. And this is a fantastic YouTube video. So you can click on, and Paul,
it's known as the big picture. So that diagram is known as the big picture. If you put it into YouTube, you'll see a 9.5-minute video that will change your business. Because everyone who watches it, regardless of what business you sit in, will see themselves sitting somewhere. Now, if you zoom in and make it full screen, you'll see lots of little departments in a overall business. And it just kind of shows the synergy and the links that are supposed to exist. But what it's actually demonstrating is they're all little different tribes. Maintenance tribe, engineering tribe, quality tribe, audit tribe, safety tribe, projects tribe, corporate tribes. And it kind of hits home, really, if you adopt asset management principles and you have true synergy across them. Just to take a step back to what you were just saying before you introduced the slide. I don't look at myself as an electrical manager. How weird is that? I look at myself as someone who speaks about a bigger picture, and the bit I'm representing is the pipes and wires bit. Because if I go into that big tribal jungle or different silos and talk earth loop impedance, RCD, BSEN, 7671, all this technobabble, I lose the room the minute I start. Because not everybody is technical. So you have to approach things with a kind of a Janet and John. Hi, I'm Janet, you're John. Nice, simple apples and pears type language. And what you need to do is any asset manager, you can't manage an asset until you know what you've got and what condition it's in. If you've got 500 C2s, you've got potential risk. It's your job to translate all that technical into business risk and get the hearts and minds of every single one of those tribes so that you stand tallest to get the money to get this stuff closed out, or at least have done as much as practicable within the duty of care that you hold. People will think you're weird, but actually what you're trying to do is do what the business needs everybody to do. And that's what that big picture video makes people realize, that it's not about the individuals. And there are so many companies now that are built upon personalities, not the processes. Some companies have processes that hinder, some have processes that enable. I think, what's his name? The Tesla chap, Elon Musk, he's probably one of the biggest corporate people who just kick doors in and say, don't need meetings for now, don't need this. If there's something getting in your way, rewrite the rule book. A lot of companies are too scared of that. And with risk in itself, anyone watching this now will go, risk, oh yeah, that's the safety guy. That's the safety department that do that. Or that's that tribe called safety and they advise me. No, you advise them. If you're managing these assets, you should be informing them or understanding what corporate risk that you need to inform them and in what manner. This is about constant communication. And then things will happen. But the big picture is it's a great video.
Everybody should log on to YouTube and watch it for the 9.5 minutes.
You have to share the link after. I'm intrigued.
Let's put it like this. When I joined my current employer, I joined a very small asset management team, and I was asked to host the first team meeting. It's kind of a tradition. And the first thing I did was I said, look, I could bore you with pipes and wires and electrics and pictures of burnt out stuff, but I'm just going to show you this video. And I pressed play and I just sat there and I watched the room. And literally during that, every single person squirmed. And afterwards I went, did everybody see themselves in there? And they all went, yes.
That's good. Whoever developed it was a clever cookie. So the next few slides the next few slides are to a little bit of food for thought, really, and it's to make you kind of think about in your organization. So when we see what happens when your financial tribe are obligated to achieve something, for instance, there needs to be a reduction in spend within our environment, within social housing. We're constantly being told to make the budget leaner. And yet, what if you're then challenged from the engineering perspective to say, well, we need this, I need a 10% increase rather than a 20% reduction. And it then comes to who can shout the loudest. But it does get a little bit worse when you dig a little bit deeper. Let me explain. So here we have a landlord's gas safety record. Now, this landlord's gas safety record has been done on time. It's been done. We've got a specific date that it needs to be done by. We've gone and we've tested it. Now we are compliant, and that's what we report as organisations. But yet, a document has a number of errors on it. We then become non-compliant. But yet we've got a compliant document, but yet we've become non-compliant. And then even further, we drill into that a little bit further. We've got an electrical document here that's satisfactory, and it's got 5 years till its next inspection date. But this electrical document has 1,643 failures. Now, this isn't a domestic one, obviously, because if you work in social housing and your safety team come up to you and say, we've got an EICR with 1,643 issues, you really do have serious problems. This is a train station, but the principles are still the same. So when we talk about compliant, who makes that decision?
Just to interject, go back on that, Ryan, that is probably one of my biggest gripes, that as an organisation, we'll see how many ICRs or whatever tests we've carried out have we done. And then it's like, well, big thumbs up. So we're compliant. We've got a test certificate, not what that test certificate tells you.
Yeah. See, one of the biggest problems, Martin, is social housing, which I've tried to address it. Recently wrote a specification for a council in the Northwest for the new tender. And I tried to address it in there as well. As when you run your compliance risk, your KPIs, you take the number of properties that are currently outstanding and you put a percentage against your whole housing stock. And the problem you've got, the number will very rarely change because of the buying and selling, the voids. And what you need to do is you need to judge this month, there's 20 jobs going to go out. You need to judge your number of jobs that are going to go out of date or over the due dates by the month, not by the total number of assets that you manage, because it just skew-ifs the numbers and it doesn't mean anything.
Can I just add to Martin's comment, because Martin said something that disturbed me. And there are people out there that if they've got a certificate, they don't really care. Those people, to be honest with you, should only be offered one of two things: the windows or the stairs, because they should be slung out of an organisation, because those people and their attitude very quickly can translate to corporate manslaughter. Which we struggle to insure against.
Yeah,
it can. The problem, the one thing I always found is that threat pushes people away rather than brings people in.
Well, the trouble is if you have a company like that, Ryan, you have normalised deviant behaviour, and this is where what I was saying earlier on about going from tribe to tribe, trying to win the hearts and minds. However, you have to have and be willing to have the difficult conversations.
Yeah, you're right. There's more slides. We'll jump this and then we'll jump to some questions. But this slide here is for me trying to explain who makes the decision. Makes a decision that something is compliant. Is it just compliant? Is it not compliant? Is it just other compliant? Who makes that decision? And this is, I personally think it's black and white. If you have the intent and you know what your job is, you're either doing it or you're not doing it. And we need to be a little bit more open to appreciating that people who are competent in a specific area are the ones that decide whether or not you're compliant or not people who are by another perspective, like a department or an asset team or so on. That's the presentation. I'll just down so I can see people, because I know there's questions that come on the right hand side. If anybody has got any questions, it would be really cool to kind of throw them towards us now.
Jim has put the link in the chat for the big picture, which is very nice of her.
Yeah, no. Dave's here. Look, he's clicked back in.
Oh, I thought you finished a little bit earlier than I was anticipating there. So, I asked a question, and it could be quite controversial, and Karen's kind of responded. So, listen, I'm a massive fan of compliance across the sector. Have been for years, in all sorts of it. So here's my question. Could Grenfell have been avoided? Could have been avoided with a more comprehensive look at compliance?
Let's be very careful on how we answer this, because Grenfell is such a, when you talk about a perfect storm. Now, when you do a lot of reading and digging into the causes and things that happened in Grenfell, you talk about the weather that day. You talk about where the people were in the building that day. You talk about the maintenance work that was going on the staircase, the compartmentation issues, the maintenance regime. PFI, as anybody who works in social housing is frightened to talk up that PFI is predominantly, the purpose of PFI is to say, this is how much money we've got over a period of time. If you can do what we need to do, whatever's left at the end, we'll share 50-50. Right. So you are governed, or you are almost incentivized to spend cheap and to do cheap. Now, Grenfell is an interesting cause, and let me caveat this with, this is my opinion. It's not.
I understand. Yeah.
What we have there is the question is more comprehensive look at compliance. If people managed the maintenance and the installation, the specifications better, yes, absolutely. But that's the same with anything. That's the same with somebody tripping over, walking out of a sheltered scheme because the floor's a little bit slippy, to the likes of Grenfell, all the way up to the most catastrophic, the big catastrophe. They dot and dabbed the cladding, so there was a chimney between, a fridge set on fire. They had the window open because it was red hot that day. If it was freezing cold that day, that window would have been shut and that fire wouldn't have got sucked out and up that chimney flue. There are too many things that happened that day that became a perfect ingredient. It's something that has opened our eyes to trying to deal with compliance more, but we should be looking at more around the risk and having the right people managing the right area of work. So they're talking about building safety managers. I did sit on one of the working groups, although I got kicked off because I didn't agree with the what they were writing, so I sent it to Inside Housing and they published it, and I was told I wasn't allowed to do that, apparently. But they've now revisited and they're rewriting it, so it obviously worked. They're trying to put building safety managers in there, and they're seeing if we can put somebody in there who is competent a little bit in a lot, then they'll fix that. And that's not the case. That unfortunately, I'm a qualified electrician, but I know a lot about Legionella, fire risk assessments, lightning conductors, communal ventilation, but I don't know enough to manage them in a more robust way. So the short answer is, if people managed compliance or they understood risk a lot more, would we have had Grenfell? I don't think so. I don't think we would have had Grenfell.
I totally agree with you. Karen Thode replied that she thinks it's, I don't know if you can see these actually.
Yes.
She mentions about it could have been mitigated by starting way early in the process and looking at procurement and the legitimization, the legalities of that. And also, I think the most valid point, Ryan, I'd love the guys around the table here, around England, to say what they think on this one. So it doesn't simply apply to the recording of percentage risk targets. It starts at the very beginning when developing the procurement strategy. So I think it has to start way earlier in the chain for it to be addressed. And I think maybe Grenfell was a wake-up call to a lot of people. Paul, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, procurement. You've just swore at me. You've just swore.
It was Karen's fault.
I use quite offensive language at work. I use the C word quite a lot. Competence. Never mind compliance, because to certain parts of businesses, they can be quite offensive. Procurement for me has always been, since procurement arrived on the scene in the early 2000s. They were supposed to prevent the corruption of handing stuff to your pals, which was great. But the trouble is if you incentivize procurement officers to seek best value for a business, which is not a bad thing, but you incentivize them, they will always create matrices and frameworks where cheap is king always, because that individual wants, and then you effectively corrupt the procurement. So quality and safety is never in the forefront unless you make it. I mean, I did a tender on a railway that I used to work on, and I made sure that the awarding framework, the cost was 40%. of the total value of points. And honest to God, it was like it had such an impact across the entire company, and I stuck to my guns because it was my project, my award.
I'm going to jump in with another C word that's criminal.
Yes.
When you do that, it's almost criminal. Now, Karen, I know, is an expert in those areas, and will totally agree with you in a range of those areas. Too many people inside associations been looking at technology and or process and or compliance. Listen, I was going to say pissed off there, but I won't. I'll say annoyed that they just cut too many corners. And yeah,
they need to know what the big picture they're looking at, or at least go on a journey with competent persons to help them understand the big picture. And that big picture always forms the word risk at a board level. And then when you dig down, then you realize where the compliance layers are and in what discipline and what subject. A building safety manager, if it was the sake, I assume that role would be to stitch all that together. But without the support at board level, without purist asset management and the removal of tribalism in companies, it's going to be very difficult.
I think what they're trying to do, Paul, with the building safety manager is one of the things that we've seen the decline of over the many years I've been in the trade is the use of clerk of works.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, this is the reintroduction of a different term. They won't have as in-depth knowledge as the clerk of works, but the clerk of works were an absolute genius, and they were I used to always call them the gatekeeper. Now in Scotland, a lot of people still have clerk of works, and it works really well because that clerk of works understands the organisation. They were privy to the development of the specifications, so they were there to develop what the client wants or the organisation wants, so they can manage the output in accordance with the client specifications, and that works quite well. Hopefully that's what'll start coming back with these building safety managers. But the people who are writing these standards and who are trying to write the new this new guidance, they are so disjointed from reality. It's unbelievable. They're saying that these building safety managers all need to be chartered engineers. That's never ever going to work. No. You're not going to have a chartered engineer who wants to go and be a caretaker in a high-rise building. That's not what somebody goes and gets their CEng for.
No, it's not.
That's not. They're not.
And they evidently don't understand what CEng criteria is. Martin and me, we're both chartered engineers. There's 17 criteria. It's part of a framework of engineering excellence, ethics, standards, CPD. Doesn't mean you're going to manage a building any better. We've always said the ABBA effect. Every single person's got an attitude, behaviour, and agenda. If they've got a bad attitude, you can forget anything. It all goes out the window.
Yeah. Karen's got a lot of comments here, and I think they're absolutely fantastic. But we're kind of using the Q&A as a chat forum now, which is not what I mentioned. Ryan, I was going to ask, we'll come to another question or two in a second, because we've got some time because you finished up a little bit early, which is great, because this is stimulating a lot of very important chat. But I want to bring it back to technology.
Okay.
Ryan, as somebody that provides software, and the two guys, Martin and Paul, are obviously very experienced in the real world here. Although I think we've just lost Martin. I'm sure he'll be back. Yeah. What I was going to ask is, do you find, because I find this, that people, when you're talking a technological solution to something like compliance, that people just quite easily say, and I was talking to someone about this earlier in the day, that they assume the technology will sort everything. And the software, in my honest opinion, Ryan, doesn't sort everything.
Yes,
it's attitude, it's culture, and so on. So I won't answer your question, but could you give us some feedback, Dave, and maybe Paul's comment as well?
Yesterday, Paul tagged me in a message on LinkedIn where a guy was asking if software was the answer to compliance. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to read out my answer.
Please.
That should hopefully answer. Software is a series of dots and dashes, zeros and ones, etc., that are constructed to adhere to a series of instructions defined by a human. Those instructions take into account things that are programmed to fail, pass, or flag knowledge-based information. To manage assets, you need to understand technical engineering and corporate risk profiles and others. Defining those from a personal perspective via a competent practitioner requires an understanding that software has yet to understand. If you look at the Winograd schema, software doesn't understand. This is what it really irritates me when people say we use artificial intelligence, we use machine learning. You don't use artificial intelligence, and you do not use machine learning in the management of compliance or risk within an organization, simply because computers haven't yet learned how to understand the English language like a human, technical, competent person can. Perfect example. I'm a computer, or you're instructing me as a computer, and you tell me to put a trophy in a suitcase. The computer doesn't know what a trophy is. It doesn't know how big it is. It doesn't know what a suitcase is. It doesn't know if you can put that trophy in that suitcase. So you're given, you have to educate computers, really. So what I put at the end of that is software is one of the tools in the bag. Depending on how good the people are behind the software, their experience of the sector they work in, and depending on how much benefit it gives to your organization, depends whether or not that tool is your best tool in the bag or your worst tool in the bag.
Did they respond?
He liked it, but he didn't respond to it.
It's fair to say the asset management community is always one of a lot of debate, and I'm fortunate. The last 2 years in a row, the IAM conference in London, I've been able to chair some of the days, so like the panel rooms where we're presenting the papers, and so I've seen people all the way from America to the Philippines, Thailand, all tell their journeys of asset management, and it's amazing. There's always a common thread, but if you look at the asset management big picture and whatever form you start on, everybody starts on the ladder at a different place, and it's always the place that's best for them with their finances and their appetites and everything else. There's no one clear path. It's just these are the things that you need to remember and think about and consider and fit your business, and it's a very difficult long-term journey, and people don't realize that, I don't think yet.
Sorry, guys, I lost you for a while there.
Sorry, Martin. Yeah, don't worry. We're all talking about
all good. I mean, like, obviously, just backtracking some of the things that were said. Like, for me, my biggest battle personally in social housing at the moment, to use the tribe metaphor, is the engineering tribe versus the finance tribe. It's just a constant battle. I mean, I was amazed that Paul managed to get more than 50% quality through on a tender document.
The trouble is they're the ones who end up in the dock, and I just point at them as the blockers.
Totally. I mean, I have once said them that, like, if you do go to court, it'll be somebody like me pointing at you saying you didn't do this because of.
Worst case, Martin,
the problem you've got there, Martin, is the problem you have there, Martin, and they know it. People know this. It's not a case of if you went to court or Dudley Metropolitan Council go to court because something's happened. It's not a case of the engineering tribe seeing to the finance tribe. Well, I did tell you, you all wear the same hat. You all wear the same top with the same logo. If you can't have your in-house relationships, when it goes to an external PR court case, you're absolutely screwed. If you can't fix it in-house, you're never going to win out externally.
It's exasperating at times.
Courts are there to, if you don't mind me just chipping in, courts are there to
go for it, Paul.
To almost sort through the rows. It's like on fire safety. It's like if you've got issues over fire safety and who's responsible. Well, it doesn't matter who's responsible in the context of you've all got a duty wearing the same hat, the same badge to cooperate and coordinate and resolve the problem. And if it means going to a different part of the business and changing a contract or a lease boundary or you have to do that because a judge will sit in there and go, well, why couldn't you all just get on and agree? And if it comes down to personal egos, it then comes into corporate manslaughter, and especially depending on the output of it. But
it is. Go on, Dave. What you're gonna say something?
Yeah, no, you're unruly bunch, this lot. But it's all good stuff. No, I like the debate. Tom Robbins from Switchy has asked a question: what impact has the fitness for human habitation legislation had on a housing association's perception of financial risk rather than compliance? That's interesting.
It is an interesting question, Tom, because the fitness for human habitation is I think they've just updated that recently, because you used to have your decent home standard, and the decent home standard. Take a step back and look at the decent home standard. That required us to, I think, Landlord and Tenants Act is section 8, 10, and 11, which talks about the fitness for human habitation, and it says that every property should be free from risk on the sanitary, the water, the gas, and all of this stuff, and that's what the regulations refer to. When we've then reviewed and we've come to the fitness for human habitation and we talk about financial risk to an organisation, what you're actually seeing is there is now a guidance document that says that this is the bare minimum that a property should meet. And the problem we have with that from a social housing perspective is, instead of us thinking outside the box or laterally, we look at how many housing do we have, what is the current condition of those, and are we compliant to the fitness for human habitation or not? Whereas we should be thinking, what do our tenants need? What is the requirement? How do we reduce the defective premises, the disrepair claims? How do we improve the lives of people who we provide services to? Unfortunately, we look at things from we have 1,000 properties, and the fitness for human habitation says that all electrical installations should be within a 30-year period. For instance, they should have been rewired within a 30-year period. They then say, well, when was the last time they were rewired? They were all rewired in the last 30 years. Now, if they were rewired 30 years ago, personally, they're not fit for human habitation because they don't take up the advances in technology around safety. But in terms of that document from a financial perspective, that organisation can't be downgraded and can't be judged because they meet the minimum standards of the fitness for human habitation. It all boils down to how people perceive, again, the risk. It is an interesting question.
Yeah, no, I like that question. This one here, given recent events have not prompted some organisations to focus on this, what do you think it will take to make landlords or HAs who are less advanced focused on their risk management and compliance?
Unfortunately, these are the type of organisations, if you don't have a hold on your compliance, if you don't have a hold on your processes around dealing with potential risk, then you are walking yourself down to seriously hurting somebody or seriously or killing somebody. And I guarantee, like I said during the presentation, there is a number of case law that you can go out and I won't say the names of them because obviously I don't want to kind of force people towards them, and some of them might still be ongoing. But people have died in social housing because of people's lack of management of risk. And you can reel them off. We've got Landlord and Tenants Act, we've got Housing Act, HSSRS, Consumer Protection, Electricity at Work regulations, Health and Safety at Work, defective premises. There is plugs and sockets. There is so many regulations that tell you or guide you to doing the right thing that if you get it wrong, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong job. Yeah,
it's scary how these things can happen. Let me see on the questions. Now, Scott Crowley has really made a comment, but I think it's backing up the previous one rather than a question. You know, and I maybe jump back to this one. I think the balance between quality score and cost at 60-40, I've seen it worse than that, actually. I have seen it the other way, which is...
Can I add one little thought process in there? I think if a business has a health and safety department or entity within their business, anyone who's doing compliance should be sat within that umbrella, because the compliance people should be truly independent, should not be persecuted for having a voice, and should be able to report directly up to the safety team, because that will in turn develop their own competency in translating the compliance into risk talk, which will then allow the head of safety to go, no, you're not doing that. No, you're not doing that, because my compliance guy has learned the lessons from this, and this is what he's done, and this is the risk, this is the business impact. I had it once before. I worked at EDF, and my technical department got moved into safety, and the minute it did, we were untouchable. Nobody tried to bully us. It was great. We actually got to do the job diligently without fear of threat or anything.
Paul, that is a brilliant point, because in all the landlords I've spoke to, of which there are loads over the years, I don't think I've ever seen that once, that independent voice. That it's almost like, you see these government independent reviews, they sit outside the political parties, they sit outside the regulations, and they're allowed to speak their voice. I can't tell you one single landlord that has that in place. So maybe that's a fundamental issue, and I can see from your reaction you're probably thinking.
Well, if post Grenfell, there's supposed to be dramatic change across the sectors. If you ask the people who are there now to change, that's just stupid, because they're going to look at themselves in the mirror and go, "What needs to change?" I don't know. I know if we click our heels together and say change, it'll happen. No, it won't. It needs dramatic and drastic, complete transformation of a business. So org charts, roles, responsibilities, removal of tribalism. They won't do that because they're scared. Simple as that.
Well, because an interesting question has popped up. But before that question, I'm going to ask you to answer potentially Karen Thordy's question. She's all over this.
She seems really clued up. Hi, Karen.
I have a feeling, Karen, I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to let Paul and Martin answer this question because I have a feeling I know what they're going to say.
Well, let me ask.
I don't want to be accused of
teaching
something to you.
Let me read it out, Ryan. Yeah. Well past. How can software solutions, excuse me, be used appropriately to prevent manipulation of data, which requires to be reported, for example, meeting minimum standards? Oh, fantastic question. Guys, Paul and Martin, the sloppy shoulder of Ryan was given over there.
Well,
I have a conflict of interest in the answer to that question.
We use Ryan's product for like checking all our certificates that come in, and it does lift a great burden off our engineers, saves a lot of time, and what can't speak can't lie. It can only return accurate results. So I'm a massive advocate of Ryan's product. Is he blushing yet? No.
A little bit, yeah. You can't see because I've got the window open.
So but that said, like I said earlier, that you always need engineers behind it. A software solution is never there just to stand alone. It always needs somebody, a competent person behind it, just overviewing it. And so it's just another tool, as would be a pair of pliers to an electrician.
I can answer that as well. Really I'll try not to make Ryan turn purple. So you know me, Ryan, blunt and open and honest. So I joined my current role about 2.5 years ago, and I used Ryan's software to try and ascertain what sort of a state I was in, because I didn't have any asset information, any asset knowledge. And without the asset information and knowledge, you don't know what risk level you have, you don't know what funding you need, you don't know where you need to concentrate or target first. And using Ryan's software totally, it kicked me back quite a lot. It enabled me to go and kick a contractor who weren't doing their work correctly, and they didn't even dare argue. But what it did, it gave me a baseline. It gave me a working platform to go from and springboard and investigate more and try and delve down and discover more risk. And that wasn't using software, that was using manual tasks, manual competent experts to build on that portfolio knowledge, so I could build it into my strategies and my asset portfolio knowledge, so that I always operate the hit by a bus policy. You should leave the place better than, and all your knowledge and information. But what it did allow me to do was it allowed me to identify more use of technology would better risk averse the business. So for instance, I run a railway and we're about collecting revenue and running trains. It's pretty much all the company cares about in respect of we must run trains in time, we must collect the revenue. So my electrical stuff is irrelevant until it trips out and we lose money. But if I apply technology to that, and I can respond quicker and I can understand what I'm doing and understand the risk connected to my electrics, then there's something else that nobody's ever done before. And that's what I'm currently doing at the moment with the works. I'm implementing more technology that I use. The technology does not use me. I use the technology. And if I can't use technology, I'm not competent for the job.
Paul, if I have a mission in social housing, it's to get this sector away from being reactive to
what I'm doing in rail,
as Ryan mentioned earlier. And that's what
exactly what I'm doing in rail, because I've got an entire route that I can actually do it in. And luckily my board and my directors are fully supportive of it, albeit frustrated as well, because it's costing them a lot more than they thought.
But then that's another subject. Return on
Dave,
investment.
we've got 1 minute. Let me clear these two questions out for you.
Go for it.
We've got, what are the blockers you face the most? Now for me, that is a really easy question to ask. The biggest blockers in compliance in social housing is people's lack of understanding and lack of ability to want to understand. So, for instance, really quickly, I would work for a local authority and I would need to rewire 1,000 properties to bring the risk to the organisation down. I would then go up against somebody who needed the same £1 million to paint 4 high-rise buildings. And they won because the organisation thought that me rewiring 1,000 properties would not be something that they could advertise and that the local MPs could see. But if we painted 4 high-rise buildings, the local MPs could see that we're spending the money wisely. If the organisation understood what I was seeing and the way I said it, then the organisation would spend the money where it needs to be and where the organisation isn't going to hurt as much. And it is people's lack of it's that want to understand. I've got my objectives. As long as I meet my objectives, I don't really care that you're not as loud as me. Therefore, I'm
Ryan,
cool.
I think you could call that competency-based attitude.
It is, yeah, it is. And then Dave, on the other one from Jane.
Yeah.
I didn't know Jane was here. Nice to see Jane's
good old
name.
friend Jane.
TPAS. Now this is going to be a little bit. I'm going to have to be very careful how I respond to this because I don't want to disrespect any tenants in social housing. But what I would say is, if you bring a tenant into an advisory board to make decisions based on your risk as a corporate entity, you need to ensure that that tenant is fully aware that this isn't about them. This is about the collective. This is about the decisions we make as a corporate organization to provide the same service to everybody. Now, one of the big problems I've always found is when you get tenants coming in, that they will say, "Oh, by the way," at the end of a meeting, you'd always have one that would say, "Oh, by the way, one of my friends has just got a new kitchen, and where am I on the list for a new kitchen?" You see, well, you're not on the list. Well, can I be put on the list? And you normally find that some people start being a little bit dishonest with their what's that saying from Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. And I guess that's what I'm trying to see. And a tenant does have a voice because it is their castle, it is their house, it is where they live, it's their home, and the decisions we make should be 95% why for our tenants, because they're the people who we do this for. But that other 5% should be very clear cut why we're making the decisions.
Just explain to everyone. I don't mind going a minute or two over here. The TPAS is the Tenants Advisory Service, really the body that deals with the tenant's voice. But I'm just thinking maybe in the next event we do get some tenants, some tenant board members on these things. They have a voice, yet they're not on this forum today.
Yeah.
So if you know of real participative tenants that have got a real good voice and a real good message, then I think we should get them on the next one. Guys, Ryan, Paul, Martin, thank you very much. We're going to have a half-hour break now. More questions, just pop onto the guys' stand, have a coffee, have a chat with them. That was a really good conversation, really high-level one. So coffee break, and then we're back on to Digital Smidigital with myself and a few others.
Thanks, Dave.
That. It should be good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye now.